Hello, this is Miss Andrea, and today I want to talk about much ado about critical race theory. Um, Critical race theory, according to EdWeek publication, is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. Not quite as old as me, but it's been around. And the core idea is that racism is a social construct and that it is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but something embedded in our legal systems and policies. Now, the basic tenets of critical race theory came out of a framework for legal analysis in the late 70s and 80s when I was a kid. It was created by scholars Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, and Richard Delgado, among others. A good example would be in the 1930s when government officials literally drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risks, often explicitly due to the fact that there were Black people there. Banks then subsequently refused to offer mortgages to Black people in those areas. And so if you're not aware, what that sets up is they're only giving loans to white people, and only people with more money can buy in these Black areas, which sets up a landlord-tenant dynamic and a lack of homeownership. So critical race theory also has ties to other intellectual currents, including the work of sociologists and literary theorists who studied links between political power, social organization, and language. And its ideas have informed other fields like humanities, social services, and teacher education. So, that's what critical race theory is. So here's the thing. Critical race theory is not a synonym for culturally relevant teaching. It's not, which is something that emerged after critical race theory. Critical race theory, 70s, 80s, culturally relevant teaching, 90s, okay? This teaching approach seeks to affirm students' ethnic and racial backgrounds and is intellectually rigorous. But it's related in that one of its aims is to help students identify the causes of social inequality in their own lives. And so it seems that the problem with critical race theory is that people don't want anyone to mention race at all. And it's really a super fragile viewpoint in which to go about life. You know, and it's exhausting, right? In my opinion, and not mentioning race at all in the classroom makes history really difficult to discuss in any meaningful way. Okay? So, what is blowing my mind right now is the fact that people are trying to stop teachers from talking about race in K-12 classrooms. But that's not even where critical race theory has ever been taught, okay? Critical race theory is largely collegiate. It's been taught on a collegiate level to mature adults. 3 decades old. It teaches that racism is a social construct as opposed to something tied solely to an individual, and the lingering effects it has within society. Proponents argue that the learning of history of racism is crucial to addressing the inequities that result from it, while critics say it singles out white people as the bad guys, and within schools teaches white guilt. But they're trying to legislate something that was never a problem, ever. the schools have never done more than try to teach history in context. Tell the truth about slavery-ish. Like, they do a bad job at it. They still whitewash everything and erase, and lighten all the facts. So, like, critical race theory has never been taught in K-12, but, it just seems like a way for people to be heard. So anyway, so this is what's going on in colleges. So now that they've been running around K-12 schools making this big mess, they're now coming back at the colleges, because I think maybe that was the point the whole time. Erica Townsend Bell, director of Oklahoma State University's Center for Africana Studies, said, "As far as we're concerned, it'll change nothing we do. Her department has not talked about nor been instructed to review its syllabus or any of its classes, including a race theory class the department offers sporadically. These laws are in search of problems that don't exist," said Townsend Bell, an associate professor of political science. "No one's work is about pointing and saying, you should feel bad about this to a particular student or accusing an individual of racism. Can't imagine any educator worth their salt taking that approach. Our work is academic. It's about analyzing the ways systems and institutions and history inform the way populations are treated unequally." I don't think that's a sin, and I especially don't think that's a sin on a college level when we're already dealing with mature adults. Now, I didn't put it in my notes, but some colleges have been hit to take out some courses that address critical race theory, and they were dropped for the fall, but then they were picked back up again for winter term because they were taken from being mandatory classes to electives. I guess that's fair. None of it is, why are we trying to legislate something that was never a problem? It seems like we're looking for problems. It seems like we're looking to put Black people in their place. It seems like we're looking to erase history that reveals the truth about inequality in America and why we are all at different levels racially, which allows racism to continue, because if students never address the fact that Black people are literally at a lower economic status on average because systems have been put into place to keep us there, then people are going to continue to think that Black people are lazy and unmotivated. That's what critical race theory is about. So I run a homeschool program. And in my homeschool program, that is history-based. I don't claim to teach anything but history. All the history, nothing but the history. I was this many years old when I heard about critical race theory. I have on my birthday shirt. It is my birthday month, 1968. I am turning 53. I was this many years old, 52 in 11 months, when I heard of critical race theory. But this is how I teach history, and I think it allows you to teach an inclusive history that includes everyone, that doesn't offend or upset or victimize anyone whose ancestors may have been colonizers. Anyway, I care. I absolutely care. But I just think this whole critical race theory argument is too much and reactionary and akin to gerrymandering. Okay, I'm going off. Okay. So, in my homeschool program, I just teach history. I don't teach standard history. I don't teach directly from the history books. I am actively writing history books right now. I don't teach European history. I don't teach history from the viewpoint of the conquerors, because the person who conquers typically teaches history, and so their story gets told in the way that makes them feel good about themselves. I don't teach Black history. I just teach history. Okay? In the process of creating my courses, I make it a point to cover history from everyone's perspective, all the people, everyone's perspective. I stick to facts, and I avoid the myths, with the exception of ancient history that is largely rooted in mythology from the year 1200 BC to about 500 BC. But that is the only time I deal with mythology, is when mythology is relevant. Okay? I make sure to approach history and events from the viewpoint of all people, all of us. And here's some examples. When I taught ancient history this past year, I defaulted to scientific research that Homo sapiens originated in Africa. Because they did. I make it abundantly clear that Egypt is part of Africa, because it is. And I also spent time discussing the kingdoms of Nubia, also known as Kush, and that many Egyptian advancements actually happened a little further south in the continent of Africa. But because Kush and Egypt, or Nubia and Egypt, depending on the time period, had this thing of I conquer you, you conquer me, I conquer you, you conquer me. Actually, it's up and down. A lot of the advancements got confused and muddied. The boundary lines got confused and muddied, and kind of everything sarcophagus-y or pyramidish got attributed to Egypt, an Egyptian, and it's not necessarily true. So I use science and I use digs, archaeology digs. We reference a lot of archaeology and things like that to pinpoint what's where and who's really responsible for what, right? Just the facts. When teaching about the ancient world, we aren't just talking about the Fertile Crescent and Rome, which is mostly what students learn about when they're taught about ancient history. They get the Fertile Crescent, which includes India, the whole Jesus area. They include India, Mesopotamia, everything along the Nile River, the Red Sea, and all that. And then they get Rome. We go a lot further than that. We go in line by time period, and we jump around. We cover the Indus Valley, we cover China, we cover Mesoamerica, and we cover Africa. The only place that I really see that happening in traditional school is in a course called World Geography, which students tend to get in 8th grade, but it kind of just grazes through, and it's not in depth at all. And it's not even like the ancient history of, it's just, these are the cultures. This is how this culture came, this is how this culture came. And it's just really a quick snap. And I make sure and I cover, time period to time period, 100-year gaps, 200-year gaps, whatever's necessary. What was going on in this area. This was going on here, this was going on here. This was going on here. Remember, when I get to the next period, I'm like, this is what's going on here. Remember, that was going on here first. So it's not just like these people discovered. It's like these people may have been influenced by those people. So you get the full picture of advancements and how ancient tools came to be, who had them first. You can tell who migrated where by where the ancient tools suddenly popped up in, the layers of the digs and things like that. So let's move on to American history. When I teach American history, I spend time on the fact that America was already populated before Columbus arrived. Like there were people here, they were thriving, and they had lives before Columbus arrived. Like real, there was a country happening. Okay, I tell the truth about Lewis Clark and Sacagawea. Look it up. She didn't volunteer to be a guide at all. We don't buy into the Pocahontas myth. We tell the truth about that. We don't hide the fact that the founding fathers were hypocritical about all men being created equal because they had slaves. We make sure students understand that the country was built on theft of land and free labor, because it was. We discuss how the Indian Removal Act not only took land from Native Americans, but stripped freed Americans from Native American populations and returned them to slavery, because they did. We don't glaze over Jim Crow, and we give ample time to civil rights. Now, I mention those things because those are the things that stick out about things that I teach, but I'm not just going through like Black timelines and Native American timelines. I'm going through all of history. You know, I go through all the presidents, I go through all the wars and the whole thing. But if we get to a point that we know had racial happenings, we stop and we talk about it in order. I'm not telling children what to think, I'm just giving them the facts. They're looking at the history and they're looking at what they know about the world around them. And they're making their own decisions, they're discussing them with their parents. And my class is more non-Black than Black. And my parents have always been fine with the lessons their children have received. This is just teaching history in order based on a timeline, being sure to include all of the people of the world involved, and to teach facts without emotion or judgment. This is what happened, we tell them. Learn the stories so you do not repeat the sins of the past. Michelle Bott Israel, hope I said that right, asks, can I opt to put more emphasis on Black history than standard history? The short answer is yes, because guess what? We homeschool and we can teach however we want. But let's just go through the steps. Homeschool laws in most states in the United States say that you have to teach English language arts, social studies, and reading. Parents must teach no less than 180 days a year, and 4.5 hours a day. And it, of course, can average. You can do more days, less hours, more hours, less days, but that's the average. It does not say what you must teach in these subjects, only that you need to teach these subjects. A lot of states also mandate math and science. But, you know, basically teach the subjects. Doesn't say what curriculum you use, doesn't say how to teach it. So that said, yes, you can opt to put more emphasis on Black history than standard history. But there are things you need to consider when you're adjusting curriculum for kids. Question 1, do you intend to homeschool all the way to the end, all the way toward graduation? If so, your choice of curriculum won't affect the child's compulsory education. It won't affect them on a K-12 level. You won't be missing things that they have to build upon if you decide to put them back in school. 2, do you plan to put the child into public school later? In my area where I live, it is not uncommon to put children in public school for high school because we have amazing high schools here. Not that I care. If so, you should consider making sure your student has the current background information to keep up and build upon for a public school. So if you're going to put them in school in, say, high school, you want to spend middle school years teaching a more full version of history, world history, American history, at an age-appropriate level. Because at some point they'll be in a classroom and the teacher will start explaining something and they'll say, but you already know about X, Y, and Z, and you don't want your kid to be blank. So that's what I'm saying. Number 3, is your student college bound? If so, you need to teach specific topics and subjects for your child to be accepted into college. In the state where I live, they tend to just go ahead and assume that homeschool students don't have proper history knowledge. And unless you can prove that unequivocally, which isn't that hard to prove if you look at my videos on doing the portfolio and things like that, you show the curriculum XYZ, and you can prove that your child has had history. But they typically assume that in the state colleges here that your child hasn't had the proper history, and so what they'll do is they'll make them take an American history and a world history course at the college level and not give them college credit for it, because that counts as preparation for college. So once again, you can teach your child whatever history you want, but you're going to want to make sure if they're going to college that they have had some standardized, to some degree, American history and world history. And that's the answer to that question. So in general, the younger the student is, the more freedom you have to put emphasis on Black history. Because as I just walked you through, it depends on when you're putting them back in school, whether it be for high school or whether it be for college or what have you. So you might want to spend those early years grounding them in Black history and then teaching them how the rest of history kind of fits in, so that they get the full story of history. And I think that's a good idea, is to use those elementary years to teach Black history, because to build self-esteem, so that, there are people in history who look like them, so they don't feel excluded from history. So I think that's kind of the right idea. As a student gets older, and if they're college bound, you might also want to make sure they're getting history that is common knowledge, so they can function in history discussions in the classroom and out of the classroom. You don't want your child to be hit with information for which they don't have an intelligent comeback. So let's talk about erasure for a minute. At West Point High School this year, students at Kira Washington and Layla Temple, who are both Black, were named valedictorian and Saluditorian of their class during the senior awards ceremony last week. At this point, we're probably 2 weeks back. The story's been going around for about a week. The initial valedictorian and Saluditorian awards were given after considering the weight of difficult classes and then ranking the students based on the highest GPA. So first we consider the weight of the classes. What is each class worth? Because some of these classes are hard. Take that into consideration and then do the math and then say, you're first, you're second, you're third, blah, blah. The initial awards were given after considering the weight of the difficult classes and then ranking the students based on highest GPA. Non-Black parents, or parents of other students, thought their kids deserved the honors instead of the Black students and demanded a recount. Their children were then awarded co valedictorian, and co-salutatorian positions, in spite of the fact that those kids took dramatically easier classes. Now, that is erasure. They took those girls' awards and watered them down and, gave them to someone else. This actually happened to me in high school. I was not valedictorian, salutatorian. I wish. 1986. Back then in New York, we had 3 levels of classes in high school. You had your survey classes, which were literally just a survey of the subject. And then you had your Regents classes, which were more in depth at a higher level. And you had to take a state test for every core class you took. So at the end of every school year, I was taking 4 to 5 classes, and they weren't AP tests. They were Regents exams. And then we had honors courses, which interestingly I never knew about until senior year, and I was like, I should have been taking those. And then we had AP courses. And I actually graduated the first year we took AP courses. I ranked number 20 out of 200 students, putting me in the top 10%, which was fine. But I took AP classes, 2. And all my classes were Regents classes. But somehow, several students who only took survey classes ranked above me and got scholarships that I did not. By the way, I was the only Black student in the top 10 that year. And the school was 75% African American. So who wants to crunch those numbers? So I can say I empathize and sympathize with these students from Alpine, Texas, who are robbed of their honors. By the way, this put the salutatorians' scholarships at risk, because when the school sends her records to the school, she has to be ranked as number 2. And now because there are 2 valedictorians, the salutatorian is now ranked at number 3. So hopefully the school will get wind of the whole ordeal and let her keep her scholarships. But they have not only erased her record at the school, but now they're endangering her college career. Because some parents whose kids pressed the easy button couldn't handle the fact that 2 Black girls were valedictorian and salutatorian. And this is why Black families are opting out of public school and moving into the homeschooling arena. And they were doing this even before COVID-19. Because we know that our children will get shortchanged. We know that our children will get dumbed down. We know our children will get let down. And we want better for them. If the school systems were being fair, they would rank them the same way the colleges rank them for admissions, which is the initial way they were ranked. You look at each course, the course is scored. Normal courses are scored on a 0 to 4. Harder courses are scored on a 0 to 4.5 or a 0 to 5, and some even 5.3, depending on how rigorous the classes are. And then you do the math and you rank. But because parents said, but Timmy deserves valedictorian, these girls got seriously shafted. So if that's how they're going to do it, then why even take advanced classes? Everyone just presses the easy button. So that's all I have for today. I hope I answered the question. If you have a question, please ask. I will make a video if it warrants the explanation. And till next time.